Hello, everybody. I'm Sam Carchidi from Philly Hockey Now, and we're back with our Flyers podcast, and we're really excited to have Brian Startare here. I'm sure you know Brian. Brian has been with WIP, with the Fanatic. He still writes hockey, and he's working peddling ads at the Philadelphia Inquirer. He's one of the most knowledgeable hockey people I know. Brian, welcome.
Thank you, Sam. Got to make a living. I wouldn't call it peddling. I would say selling what your company needs. Hit me up if you need anything. Sam, it's great. It's so great to keep in touch with all the hockey guys and all the sports media. I mean, I missed it a little bit from the back and forth, but trying to stay in. And obviously, I'm a Flyers guy first and a hockey guy first and foremost. So let's talk some Flyers hockey.
Yeah, we talked Flyers for many years together when you were in Radioland, and we're going to talk Flyers now. Excuse the mess around us. We're in the process of moving. Brian had to hop over boxes to get to this couch, so I appreciate you coming. And the first question I want to ask you, did the Flyers do enough in the summer to be a playoff contender? Not a Stanley Cup contender, but a playoff contender.
No. In fact, part of the problem is the East is just loaded with great teams, and the way this playoff format is going, the Flyers are going to have to get a lot better in a hurry if they want to leapfrog some of these teams. That's the short answer. The long answer is they're going to need more than one summer. I never thought I'd say this about this team that I've been following and writing about and talking about since I was 4 years old, but this is a mess. It's a mess right now. And if I were Fletcher, I would have gone the other way. I would have tried to trade off some of these pieces. They still have cap problems. I mean, they got a little relief before the summer, and then, the couple trades and signings that they made, kind of head scratchers.
Yeah, they added D'Angelo, who is going to help the power play, no question. He's not the best defenseman in the world, and it looks like he's going to have to play on the top pairing with Ivan Provorov out. They added Nick Delorier, who gives them a second enforcer, if you will, but there was no Alex DeBrincat here, no Johnny Gaudreau, no big names, and as you said, they were cap strapped, but Fletcher made his bid.
I don't even think that Gaudreau was the right signing. I mean, I would love to have seen here South Jersey's own. He wanted to come here, but that's another long-term deal. I think he gave Columbus a little bit of a break just so he could come east again, but the Delorier signing, 4 years, 4 years at $2.5 million a year for a 31-year-old enforcer, the area have McEwen for. I don't understand that at all. I mean, that's just a waste of space right there. D'Angelo is a good player. Again, I think he's a good defenseman. I don't know if it was what is with Fletcher just not valuing assets? He trades draft picks like they're going out of style, especially high picks. I mean, the Ritzelainen re-signing for 5 years, I didn't agree with that either. I got to tell you, I'm not a Fletcher fan right now.
Yeah, and that's the one thing. Ron Hextall was not perfect, and he gets his share of abuse. But the one thing he did do was stockpile draft picks, and Fletcher, as you said, has done the opposite.
Well, the problem is you got to make good on those draft picks, and I know we'll talk about that a little later, but you talk about this rebuild. It was going on. Flyers, haven't been out of the second round since, 2010?
Yeah, they've won one playoff series in
that was in the bubble.
The last 10 years, right. So it has not been a good summer, but, they're hopeful that some of the players that either had poor seasons last year or had injury-plagued seasons bounce back. That's what Fletcher is laying his hopes on. And let's talk about some of those players. I think there's 6 main players that fall in that category. Travis Konechny, Ivan Provorov, Kevin Hayes, of course, the goalie Carter Hart, Ryan Ellis, and Sean Couturier. Let's start with Ivan Provorov, who's been kind of a disappointment. He was a 7th pick overall. He played really well when Niskanen was his partner.
That's exactly right.
And he looked like he was on his way with Ellis as his partner, but so far, I want to see if you agree with this. It looks like he can't carry that pairing by himself, and by now, I would think he should be able to do that.
Well, you're right. By now, when he first came into the league, he was he was really sought after. It was a great draft pick. And then you're right. When he played with Matty Niskanen, he was phenomenal. That was a great top pair of defense. One of the reasons why they did so well on there in the bubble. But you lose a guy like Niskanen, and the confidence goes away for one of those young defenders. Now, Provorov's got it all. He can skate. He's got a good shot. He's got a good head on his shoulders. For whatever reason, the last 2 years, he's not been good. Now, maybe a stabilizing force with D'Angelo. Who knows? Maybe with Ellis. Ellis played 4 games. He had 5 points. and that guy was a pretty good producer in Nashville. I think Provorov will bounce back, but I wouldn't be. I think the best case scenario is hopefully he plays really, really well, and then trade him at the deadline because he's a valuable defenseman at the deadline. Should bring you some assets.
Yeah, I actually wrote a column in the summer about Provorov and Konechny, saying that the Flyers should just clean everything out and trade one of the two and stockpile draft picks and get some prospects. Let's go to TK right now. He's been an enigma. He had 3 straight 24-goal seasons. Last 2 seasons, he's really dropped off. What do you see from him?
I can't believe this is his 7th season already. He's 25 years old. I like Konechny. Does he chirp a little too much? Maybe is he, maybe he'll mature there. But I like the way he plays. But you're right, very inconsistent. What do you have? 11 goals.
11 goals 2 years ago, 16
Right.
last year. Yeah, he's got to be a 25, 27 goal scorer, I think, for this team.
And you can't put it all on his back because, let's face it, that was tough hockey to watch last year. They haven't been really competitive in quite some time, sans the bubble. But I think TK is a guy that's still young, 25 years old. I like the way he plays. He's gritty. You get him with a couple line mates out there, I think Konechny is going to be fine. I don't think he's your problem.
Let's go to the third guy, Kevin Hayes. And out of all these 6 players, I think he has the best chance to bounce back. I think some of these guys are going to have a tough time coming back from injuries. Couturier, I think, will eventually come back, but once you have back surgery, it might take a month or 2 for him to be his old self. But I think Kevin Hayes got a head start last year because he played the final 28 games and was the Flyers' leading scorer with 22 points during that time and started to look like his old self. What do you see from Kevin Hayes? What kind of a season do you expect from him?
Well, there's no doubt that Kevin Hayes is probably the best player on this team. I mean, I think he is. I mean, when he first got that deal at 7 years, I wasn't happy. Then I see he played. I was getting a little happy, and now I'm a little worried about the back end of this deal anymore. Obviously, he's their best penalty killer. He's going to be in a role of leadership. I think it's up to him or Couturier, who the next captain is. But since they signed Couturier till next century, I'm sure he'll be the captain. But Hayes has to bounce back. He's highly paid, $7-8 million a year.
7, yeah.
7 years. He's got a long deal. He's obviously the cornerstone of what they're trying to do. He'll still be decent at an age where this rebuild's done, hopefully three years. So, again, he's a guy I think is going to have a step back year 2.
Yeah, I'll disagree with you. I think, to me, Couturier is the top player, and we'll go to Couturier right now, just because I think Couturier gives you so much defensively, much more than Hayes. He's better in the face-off circle. But what do you see from Coots and rebounding from the back surgery?
Well, I wouldn't say, like I said, we'll disagree here a little bit. I mean, I think Hayes is a premier player. I think Coots is a great shutdown defenseman. Offensively, again, he still
31 goals a couple years ago.
He gets it done, and to this point, he never really was hurt. I mean, this was probably one of his longest stretches of being out. So we can agree to disagree on there, but at least we could say this: that's our 2 best players. Couturier gives you so much, and that's another thing. You feel like giving the Flyers the benefit of doubt last year because they didn't have their best penalty killer. They were without Hayes. Their goalie was shit. I mean, I'm sorry, it was just an abomination. So you want to give them a pass, you do.
Right.
So I would say yes. I mean, he has to bounce back because he missed the entire season. I mean, it was just,
And before we go to the guy who is the key to the whole season, let's go to Carter Hart first before we get to Ryan Ellis. Carter Hart, to me, yes, he was much improved last year from the previous year, but he just wasn't the guy who has the pedigree that he has. What do you see from Carter Hart? Is this a prove-it year? He had 2 outstanding years, his first 2 years, and a horrible year his 3rd year, and last year kind of a mediocre year. Is this, you got to prove it right now that you're among the elite?
I mean, how many times are you going to say this is your prove-it year? I mean, he came into the league with a lot of hype, let's face it, and in Philadelphia, when those expectations are there, unfortunately, you have to play to that level. So that was the one thing about him. The one thing I think Carter Hart needs, especially goalies in your head, but he needs to play with a little more confidence, a little more tenacity, a little more of like I'm Carter Hart out there. I'm the goaltender. I think he's just too sullen sometimes. Oh, well, that's the way it goes. We'll have to play better. No, he's got the talent. He does. But I think if he plays with an edge, he's obviously, he could be a number 1 goalie. He played great in the bubble. He did. I wish I could have the bubble back. I'd love watching hockey on my back deck, having a beer in August. It was phenomenal instead of freezing my ass off. But I think Carter Hart, again, I think he's a talent. But the Flyers do have some goaltending in their system right now. So, yes, make it or break it year. This is it. How long can you wait around for him?
Yeah, they do have some goalies in the system, but unfortunately, Ivan Fedotov, is in the Navy right now for Russia. I really think if Fedotov was here, he would have pushed Carter Hart because
I agree.
Here's a guy who led Russia to a silver medal last year. He led his team in the KHL to the championship, and it's just a shame because he would have, on so many levels, he would have helped the Flyers, and it looks like he's not going to be here this year. But I agree with you said. I wrote this for Philly Hockey Now this week that Carter Hart has to play with an attitude, and he just doesn't seem to have that. This is year 5. It's time to show you're the boss, you're the man, you're in control, and he hasn't shown that to me.
And this is how you also get cap relief, is when you homegrown your guys and you give them these deals to stay here for a while with some stability. Goalies aren't cheap on the market. You know that. They're not cheap at all. So when you get a homegrown talent, you sign them to a pretty decent deal, you need them to perform right there. And, your goaltender is like your starting pitcher or your closer. It's the most important guy on the ice. It is it's your quarterback. And, you get crappy goaltending, you don't win.
And now the 6th guy, and to me, this guy is the key to the season. Defenseman Ryan Ellis, as you mentioned, he played only 4 games last year. Looked great in those 4 games.
5 points.
Yeah, looked great in those games. But
on 82 goals.
But the reports coming out of Voorhees are not good. It looks like he's going to miss the start of the season, according to new coach John Tortorella. We don't know how long. Nobody seems to know. And, to me, if he plays 60 games this year, Flyers are going to be a much improved team. I picked them to have 75 points this season, which is an improvement over 61. Certainly not enough to be a playoff contender. But I think if Ryan Ellis can play 60 games, I think that 75 jumps up a lot higher. And all of a sudden you're in the mid-80s to the high 80s and on the fringe of being a playoff contender. But what are your expectations for Ryan Ellis?
That's $1 million question there, because it's been so long since I've seen him play a good consistent stretch. Now I know he was a good player in Nashville, and I was excited about the trade when they made it because I think Ellis is a top 3 defenseman in the NHL, and he would have stabilized Provorov on big parts there. I mean, that's what Chris Pronger did to this team years ago when they brought in a veteran guy that could play, and had leadership quality. So I would think if he's healthy, obviously he's going to help. But the guy's aging. It was, a tough deal. He played 5 games last year. If he's healthy, I'm just not happy about him getting 60 games. You traded for this guy to be a top-level defenseman.
I think right now they would take 60.
Well, and I'm saying they would, but right now you lost this trade already. Even though Nolan Patrick is Nolan Patrick.
Yeah, and Phil Myers has been a washout.
Obviously it takes 3 to 5 years to look at any trade to see if it really worked, except for those short-term kind of
I think this trade falls under bad luck for Fletcher. Yes, you could say Ellis had some different injuries, but the Flyers have been hit. To be fair to Chuck Fletcher, Flyers have been hit with a lot of bad luck and unexpected injuries, and you can't predict that, of course. But I like how I mentioned Pronger though, because Pronger made Matt Carl a very good defenseman, because that was the pairing, and I think the same thing would happen here. I think Provorov will be much better when Ellis gets in there.
Yeah, I don't want to give Ellis. You got to give him the benefit of the doubt. He was hurt. I don't have as much slack for Fletcher right now. I'm really, really just very thin on Fletcher. I just don't like the direction of his team. Obviously,
I don't either. And I'm
I never thought I'd feel this way.
But as far as the injuries, some of these injuries you can't control.
I got you.
But let's go to our third topic, and this involves the previous Flyer GM. We've been talking about Chuck Fletcher a little bit. Let's talk about Ron Hextall, because
Mr. Penguin.
Yeah, there was some news in the last few days. Rupsov just signed in KHL. He was, of course, in the trade with Claude Giroux and many other players. He went to Florida in the Giroux trade last March. Owen Tippett was the big guy the Flyers got back, along with a number 1 pick.
I hope he pans out
in 2024. We can talk about him later too. But Rupsov was just a throw-in in that deal. But the Florida Panthers did not tender him, and he decided, adios, I'm going to the KHL in Russia. And to me, this is just an indictment on some of the picks that Ron Hextall made. He made some good ones, but not great ones.
No, we said that.
Yeah.
The fact that you got to hit on these draft picks.
Well, and let's go down the line because Hextall was a GM from 2014 to 2018. We'll start with his first pick, and of course this draft, I'm sure you covered it. 2014 was in Philadelphia. Travis Sanheim was the guy they picked. I think he was number 20 or 21 overall. How has he panned out in your mind?
I think Sanheim, last year was his best year. And I think he started to get a little more comfortable with his offensive flow, his skating ability. I mean, for years, all we heard was Sanheim was such a terrific skater. He was, gifted offensively, but, he was a good hitter. I mean, he was very physical, and I think they let him loose a little bit there. I just wonder about how Tortorella is going to handle him. Is he going to put him back on the blue line as a more of a defensive defenseman out there? But I don't have a problem with Sanheim. I mean, you can miss on a lot of picks. You can miss on a lot of picks, but I don't think Sanheim. I think Sanheim was one of his better picks.
Oh, I agree. I think Sanheim would get, a B, or you could even go as high as a B plus. But for where they picked him and for how he's developed, it took him a while, and defensemen are known to take longer than forwards.
One more thing there, Sam. The Flyers have a lot of depth at defense coming up. I mean, obviously it's a speculation on, but he could be pushed by Zamula and a few other guys out there. So he can be another guy with his contract remaining, move at the deadline as well, too. So that might be a valuable piece down the line.
Good point. 2015, they had 2 picks. And again, I think Hextall did pretty good this year. Not great, but pretty good. Provorov was picked 7 overall, and later in the draft he took Travis Konechny. How do you evaluate those two?
I mean, when you look at that deal, I mean, it's all revisionist history. I hate going back to looking at the deal. They could have had him. They could have had him. Yeah. And there's certain players in every round where you look, well, you could have drafted him. Provorov, we talked about him early. I think when he first got drafted, he looked like a 7th overall defenseman. But again, he's been inconsistent. I told you how I feel about TK. You got 2 everyday NHL players. That doesn't happen all the time. I mean, do yourself a favor. You want to go back and look at the record books, look at the draft cycles. There's going to be tons of guys you've never heard of that were drafted in the first round. So I have no problem with this year.
No question. But here's where the problems start. 2016, Rupsov. 2017, Nolan Patrick and Morgan Frost. Again, you can't blame Hextall because of the injuries to Patrick. And
you can blame him for that.
And you talk about revisionist history, but, Cale Makar was there, of course. And
so was Pedersen from Vancouver.
Right, and 3 or 4 other guys that have made it big so far. And Morgan Frost has not blossomed. This is his, we talked about, a prove-it year for a couple other guys. This is definitely a prove-it year for him. But I think you have to give Hextall an F for both Rupsov and Patrick for the way it turned out. Again, you can't predict injuries. And Frost right now is probably a D or D+. That can certainly change, but right now it doesn't look great.
I don't even think an F is a passable grade for Ron Hextall with this draft. And when's the last time the Flyers drafted that high? Yoni Pikkinen? You have to go way back to see where the Flyers drafted that's right in that level.
Patrick, of course, was number 2 overall that year.
Right, and Heeshire hasn't been setting the world on fire. I mean, and to Hextall's side, the consensus was that Patrick was supposed to be the 1st or 2nd overall pick.
No question.
The guy's soft as drugstore cotton, though. I mean, he's soft. He had his headaches. He went out there to Vegas. I mean, he'll never pan out. And when you think you could have had a player that Wayne Gretzky called the next Bobby Orr, that's a swing and a miss. You would think Howie Roseman ran this draft instead of Ron Hextall. But Rupsov, you kept waiting and waiting for this guy to develop. You kept waiting and waiting, and it never happened. Then you throw him in. This like Howie Roseman just threw away a first rounder in Jalen Reagor for nothing.
Right.
When you get these picks, you got to hit on them.
Especially when they're top.
Right,
10.
It'll set you back.
There's no question. And we'll go to the last year of Ron Hextall's regime as far as drafting, and we talked about him a little bit already. Joel Farabee, tremendous upside, and Jay O'Brien. Kind of a mixed bag there. O'Brien, for those who don't know, has kicked around. He's now at BU. It's his senior year.
He's still a young player.
He's young, but he's been up and down. But I think you'd have to agree that Farabee, you got to give Hextall probably a B+ there, and O'Brien, maybe a C- right now.
See, I like the way Farabee plays. I mean, he's a good goal scorer.
Oh, yeah.
He's a decent skater. Seems like have a good attitude. I mean,
he's a 200-foot player.
Right.
Plays both sides.
He's a good hockey player, and he hit on this one. Farabee is a good hockey player. He's going to be with the team for a while. Jay O'Brien, it's hard to have an opinion on a guy like this because I haven't seen him play all the steps for Team USA or like you had said at college here. It's a young guy. He's got to develop here. And, it's a first rounder. I think he was like 18th or 19th overall, maybe, O'Brien. He was right after. We'll see how he did on that. Time's going to tell. But the one thing you have to be careful is, I go back to the Justin Williams. Flyers were never patient. Never patient with anybody. Hextall tried.
Well, that was Hitchcock. A lot of that was Hitchcock.
Right, but I'm saying they tried to be patient here with the Hextall rebuild. But the problem is Ron wouldn't listen to anybody else. He was in charge.
Right.
And, I know for a fact he had a lot of scouts that were directing him otherwise in some of these picks. He was a control freak on certain levels. And, you can be patient for so long until things don't work out.
What's your bottom line for him as far as a grade for first rounders?
C-.
Yeah, I'm right there. I was going to say C-.
I mean, average, and it's been below average
Yeah.
because there's only been 2 players that have been above.
And you need to be much higher than that.
Right.
And it helps you cap-wise. It obviously helps you talent-wise. And the Flyers are not in a good position right now because of that. And you compound that with some of the non-moves Fletcher has made. We're in a mess right now, 61-point team.
I know we're talking hockey, but just look at what the Phillies did this year. I mean, just think about it. If you would have hit on some of their homegrown talent, they wouldn't have to go out and get Harper. They wouldn't have to go spend on Castellanos. And Real Muto got a nice deal because of Harper there. It's all free agents. Now, you don't care. You're a fan. You want to win. But if you start to hit on your homegrown players, if you start to do this thing, it saves you a lot of money to go after that added extra piece, and especially with the hard cap in the NHL.
Yeah, and I'll add something. I'll go back even further. When Mike Arbuckle was in charge of drafting, he drafted Ryan Howard at first, Chase Utley at second, Jimmy Rollins at short, Scott Rowland at third. I mean,
Is he still with the Royals?
He hit a home run. I think he retired about a year ago.
Can we bring him back with Pat Gillick? That'd be a great thing.
I think he might be a special advisor or something like that, but what a great guy.
Check out our Phillies podcast next week.
But we'll be back. We're going to take a short break, and we're going to go to our mailbag section of our Flyers podcast. And stay tuned, and Brian and I will be right back. The Broad Street Bullcast is sponsored by you. Sponsoring our Growing Flyers podcast is an inexpensive and effective way to market your company or product. Contact us on Twitter or email for more information. Welcome back to our Broad Street Bullcast. I'm Sam Carchidi with special guest Brian Startare and B-Star. We're going to get right to our mailbag section. And first question comes from Jason Boyer. Jason asked, with a healthy team, what are the realistic expectations for this 2022-23 Flyers team?
I don't know how to answer.
How many points?
Well, the over-under in Vegas, I think, is 78 or 70, between 70.
Yeah, 76 and 78.
Right, which still is not going to get you into the playoffs. So,
not even close.
I mean, the expectation is to not bore us to death and watch this team because it's a good thing Tortorella's kind of a little bit fiery, so he'll give us something to watch post-game right now and see if the young guys can. But this is not going to be a good season. I know it.
Yeah.
And I'm usually an optimistic guy when it comes to the Flyers.
Yeah, I think, a lot of fans will be satisfied with development of the young players. And if you finish towards the bottom, that means you have a better chance of getting Connor Bedard, who's going to be a generational player.
Or Nolan Patrick's brother.
I didn't say that.
I don't even know if Nolan Patrick does have a brother, but if he's not getting
I know he has an uncle who was in the NHL,
Correct.
But as far as a brother, I'm not sure. Second question comes from KB. KB says, what is more likely, the Flyers make the playoffs or win the draft lottery? We just almost touched on that a little bit, but pretty good question, KB.
The odds of winning a lottery, even a hockey lottery, are very difficult, but I think the Flyers are going to have quite an amount of ping pong balls next year. I really do. I think the odds. Well, mathematically, the odds are they make the playoffs because we don't know about unforeseen circumstances, injuries. If they get a little better, Tortorella's good.
The odds are they don't make the playoffs.
Right, but
right.
I mean, but statistically, there's a better chance of making the playoffs than it is winning a lottery, I think.
Oh,
Yeah,
maybe. But
but
if you're bad enough and get more ping pong balls, and interestingly, one of the teams that they're probably battling in the ping pong race is Seattle with Dave Haxtell. So,
Right.
and it would be just their
imagine
luck,
that.
just their luck to lose, to maybe finish with the worst record and lose like they did with the JVR and Kane.
Well, I mean, first of all, I don't want to sound like this disgruntled Philadelphia guy here, but the Devils and Rangers have been getting lucky as hell. Moving up. I mean, with Flyers moved up once and they didn't do it, but the answer is more ping pong balls. Yes, win the lottery.
All right.
That's what
the
I would
Rangers,
like to
by
say.
the way, are I think they're going to be a strong Stanley Cup contender
Well,
this year. If not win the whole thing.
When you have a Vezina
Right.
caliber
Right, no
goaltender
question.
and a Norris Trophy defenseman and 6 good forwards,
Yeah.
there's a team that drafted well.
Yeah, and they did it the right way.
That's right.
You know, they were where the Flyers were about 4 years ago. They rebuilt the right way. They brought in Panarin, but they stockpiled draft picks. They got a lot of draft picks. They did well with the draft picks.
You know,
they
that
got a lot
hurts.
of prospects.
It hurts to give the Rangers credit.
Yeah, but you got to give it
You
to
have
them.
to.
And to me, that would have been the blueprint for the Flyers, but it didn't happen. Okay, let's go to question number 3. Hockey Life asked, do you see guys like TK, Provy, Hayes, and Farabee rebounding under John Tortorella? And this is a chance, we haven't talked to you yet about John Tortorella, chance for you to talk about Torts and well, what kind of effect do you think will have on some of the guys that
That's a
just
great
mentioned?
question. That's a great question because nowadays it's not just X's and O's, but it's managing personalities. And Tortorella's been a hard ass everywhere he's gone. He's had some problems with Brooksy, his media, but he's been known to be hard on his players. He's been known to be tough on the younger folks and rely on the veterans here and there. But I don't know. I never liked John Tortorella. I didn't like covering him. I didn't like watching him. I didn't like his, especially Tampa series, and kind of lit my little bit. But I think he may be a good fit right now at this time, not just for the Flyers, but for him as well. He's been through a few stops: Vancouver, the Rangers, Columbus. He's been around. He's learned some things from all accounts, from the interviews that I've heard and the things that I've read. I mean, it seems like he's really taken to this. So, I mean, I think these players are going to want to play for a new coach. I think they're going to want to obviously get the coaches on the good side of the coach. So I think Tortorella might be a positive effect on this team,
I
and
think-
especially those players you listed.
I think he's the biggest positive and the best move they made in the offseason. And, I went over to Voorhees yesterday, and I was amazed at how many Flyers were there. I mean, they don't have to come in for about 3 weeks. The rookies maybe 2 weeks, but the veterans 3 weeks. And there were probably 18 to 20 players there, including some veterans like Lawton was there, and Cam Atkinson was there, Farabee was there. And Scotty Lawton told me that, from what he's heard, he actually talked to Torts but hasn't talked to him in person. He talked to him on the phone the other day. And he says, he understands that Torts is a demanding guy, and he said, this is just what we need. And that was refreshing to hear that from a veteran player, and a guy who is relentless on the ice, like Scotty Lawton, who's a dark horse contender, by the way, for captaincy. But, and I think that attitude is going to permeate throughout this team. I think, they're on a short leash with Tortorella. They haven't always had that short leash, and I think that's going to be good. Is this team really talented? No way at all. But, are they going to get maximum effort because of Torts? I think so.
Well, I mean, what player who isn't worth his salt doesn't want to be pushed? I mean, what professional athlete does not want to be pushed and to say, listen, this is the best version you can be? Whether or not you agree with his tactics, I mean, I hate to go back to the Phillies here, but Joe Girardi was kind of like, ho-hum, but,
He accepted losing.
Right, exactly. And I'm okay with a guy that wants to win. Is that the worst thing in the world? I mean, like I said, I didn't like the guy when he was on the other team. I didn't like Bryce Harper either, but now I love him. So, I mean, if it works, it works. But you have to be bought in on this, and they don't have a short leash. They have a short leash with the fans too. I mean, I've never seen it so down right now with this team, and I've been following this team since I was 4. So I mean, it's been a long time.
Yeah, the TV ratings were down last year. Attendance was down. You're going to see much of the same this year. Maybe Tortorella lights a fire and gets them playing and lights a spark, and maybe the fans get interested. But they have to do something. They're already starting ticket deals where it can cost you I think like $20 to go to a game, $25, and they're going to have to do that to get fans in there.
And I appreciate you giving me this forum because I say it out on Twitter here. And listen, I'm not a stepford when I say with Ed Snyder, but this team has never been the same since Ed Snyder left the night before that game against the Capitals in the playoffs. I mean, I think what's killed the Flyers is Dave Scott should go nowhere near this hockey club. I mean, if he wants to put a jacket on and says he's with the Flyers, that's fine. He doesn't know anything about hockey. I think it's corporate malfeasance sometimes when I see this because they're interested in the profit and loss. I know they're trying to put a product on the ice, and I know when you make decisions with your salary cap, it puts you behind the 8 ball here, and that's where they are right now. But, I just don't feel the same kind of, camaraderie, the loyalty, how things were done. It just seems so corporately antiseptic right now.
Well, it is, and I can tell you from a media standpoint, to be able to do interviews with the front office, you have to go through 18 different steps. Before, when Ed Snyder was there, I could just call Blake Richmond, and in 5 minutes, I would be in his office.
Yeah.
It was just totally different. They were very transparent. They were open, and one day I thanked Ed for that, and he says, you know what? If I'm only going to talk, when things are going great, there's something wrong with that.
Yeah.
I've got to face the music when we're in an 8-game losing streak or when we're out of the playoff picture. I've got to face the music,
yes.
and I got to talk, and I don't think this current regime gets that.
No, and especially in a city like Philadelphia. I mean, you got to be held accountable. You have to. I mean, and let's face it, the Flyers tickets are not cheap. It's not not easy night to take a family out to a hockey game anymore. And I want to ask you your thought on Ed Snyder. I used to do the pre and post game at the center for the home games, and you were there because you wrote about it. The Phillies were playing the Dodgers. You called me Nostradamus because Matt Stairs hit the home run, and I called it, right?
After the Flyers game, just to recap a little bit, after the Flyers game, we went into the bar at the Wells Fargo Center and caught the tail end of the Phillies-Dodgers playoff series.
Right.
And Brian said, next pitch, home run, right field wall, and that's exactly what happened. Only Stairs almost hit it out of the stadium.
Deep into the night, as Joe Buckwitz said.
Yeah.
Very after that game, we were walking the concourse. Ed Snyder invited me up to that big circular office that he had in front of it, and I had a nice glass of really good wine. I know I never could have afforded that wine, but that was good. Thanks, Ed. I appreciate that.
Ed was the best. Last question. This comes from Flyer Ginger Ambassador. He asked, how concerned are you about Felix Sandstrom as the backup goalie, and any news on Ivan Fedotov? We touched on Fedotov a little bit, and he's still in the Navy, last reports in Russia. But what are your feelings about Felix Sandstrom? He had a pretty good year with the Phantoms last year, but he is 25 years old. I mean, it's not like he's a young kid. He's actually older than Carter Hart.
Well, there's another thing where, you make it or break it. I mean, he hasn't had a lot of opportunities, obviously. He's been in it with the Phantoms here. But, I mean, I'm worried about the starting goaltender more than I'm worried about the backup goaltender. And, usually it's usually $1 million or $2 million on a backup veteran. I mean, they traded away who was his name to Tampa?
Martin Jones.
Yeah, no, before that they traded. Who was the guy?
Oh, Elliott.
Yeah, Elliott.
Brian Elliott
was a great backup. I mean, he was older and stuff like that. So, if you're making a youth movement, I mean, we won't know how to answer this, Sam, unless he plays against NHL competition on a nightly basis.
And Sandstrom, to his credit, the couple times he got in last year looked very good.
Yeah,
I mean,
but not on a consistent, longer basis.
Right. I'm not against Carter Hart playing 60 games. How about you?
No, not at all. I think it's always these baseball analogies too. But you got a
is this a Phillies podcast?
I mean, you got a 7th inning guy, you got an 8th inning guy. Bernie Pratt used to play 70 games a year.
Yeah.
Come on, man.
Yeah.
Just play. Yes, a hot goalie. Oh, it's a back-to-back night. You got to rest your goalie. Come on, just play.
I'm with you. Got anything else to add before we close up? I can't thank you enough.
Oh, I appreciate it.
It's been a long time since we talked Flyers hockey, and I hope you'll come back. And you'll jump over boxes here, or maybe I'll have moved by then. But I want to thank Brian Startare for all his excellent points today, and we had a really good time. And thank you so much for all the questions and for watching. I want to thank my producer, my son, I love him, Sam Carchidi. Thank you so much. And as the late, great Gene Hart always said, good night and good hockey.
That's it.